I'd like to call to order the February 15th meeting of the Arizona State Parks Board. And with that in mind, I would like to invite Board Member Jeffrey Buchanan to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Member roll call. Pam, do you want to just go ahead and do the roll call? That's all right.
Yes. Dale Larson,
Here.
John Sefton,
Present.
Jeff Buchanan,
Here.
Sarah King. Here. Terry Palmberg.
Here.
And we do have a quorum, and thank you particularly to Board Members King and Buchanan for making the drive over here. And Terry, did you come down from?
No.
You were here. All right. Okay, no
No,
thanks.
no.
No
thanks.
No thanks.
Just stay in town.
The rest of us are just neighbors, so anyway, thank you. As is customary, I'd like to be able to just read the mission and statement of our board: managing and conserving Arizona's natural, cultural, and recreational resources for the benefit of the people, both in our parks and through our partners. And also our vision statement is Arizona State Parks and Trails is indispensable to the economies, communities, and environments of Arizona. So with that in mind, I also would like, Bob, if you would mind, it's not formally on the agenda, but would you like to introduce your newest staff member, that is our mom here?
Mom, psychologist, sociologist. Yeah, thank you, Chair. We could introduce Pam Kaysen. She is brand new, 2 weeks on the job. She's going to fill in as the executive assistant position that, Kelly Santianes resigned. We went through a search and interview process, and Pam was selected, and we're really glad to have her. She was at Department of Administration. She was helping with the human relations database that they were creating. So she was instrumental in that process. But before that, she worked in the governor's office, Governor Ducey's office, and she tried to keep all of those people straight. Deputy Director Sarah was one of those people. So she came back for more. So I think that's a good, but it's all seriousness. We're really glad to have her. She's going to do everything as previous, but particularly with the board. If there's anything you need, Pam is always available to reach out. But she'll be running the board meetings. We're going to let her, this is her first one, but one of the process improvements that we're always trying to do internally is to make sure that our board meetings run the way your expectations are, but also are there opportunities that we can improve. So I think she's going to try to keep us on track, but at the same time make notes of things that she sees to improve. She's got a wonderful resume. It would take days to go through all of it, but I'm sure if you ask her, she'll tell you what she's done. But she's a consummate professional. We're really, really lucky to have her.
Well, thank you and welcome, Pam. Really appreciate you being here. Hope we can come to your high standards. All right. Also, I would like to just welcome all those on the phone. When we get to that particular agenda item, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. And as we get to those items of the agenda, we'll obviously recognize that. And also thank to Jeff for getting them all together and rounded up and herded for this meeting. So first agenda item is the consideration of action to approve the minutes of the December 21 meeting. Wow, that seems like ancient history, a long time ago. So is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. Chair, Jeff Buchanan, I'll move to approve the minutes for December 21st, 2023. State Parks Board meeting.
Motion's on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion is seconded by Board Member Palmberg. Any discussion? Hearing none by voice acclamation. All those that are in favor of approving the meeting minutes for December 21 indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Now annually, we have the exercise of nominating and electing our chairman and vice chairman for the State Parks Board. I'll just read the way it is on the agenda, since this is governed by the state statute, and I want to make sure Nancy realizes I'm doing it exactly the way it's meant to be as a So the board will nominate and elect its chair and vice chair in accordance with Arizona Administrative Code, blah, 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 at the first meeting following January
That
1
sounded
of each year. The
Pam has
members-
already made a note.
The members present shall select by majority of vote a chairman and a vice chairman to serve through the first meeting of January of 2024. So with that in mind, is there a nomination for the office of chairmanship?
I nominate Dale Larson.
Dale Larson has been nominated. Are there any other nominations?
Hello,
Here.
hey, how are you?
We're good, how are you?
All right.
On the phone, please make sure you are on mute. Thank you.
Dale Larson has been nominated. Let's have a roll call vote.
Uh-huh.
And I'll second it.
Okay, good. It's been seconded. It doesn't have to be, but that's all right.
Oh,
So,
okay.
no problem. So Pam, do you want to give a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Dale Larson,
Aye.
John Sefton,
Wholeheartedly aye.
Jeff Buchanan.
Aye.
Sarah King,
Aye.
Terry Pomper,
Aye.
It was a close vote, but we will. Yes, it is. So now the nomination for the position of vice chair. Is there a nomination to be put forward on the floor?
I would move that we nominate John Sefton as vice chair.
Are there any further nominations?
I'll let Jimmy or Evan know. I'm in a meeting
Sorry,
right now. I've been
Again, please
I'm
mute
asking
your
you-
phone. We
in
can,
a virtual meeting,
we hear you in the meeting.
but I'll
Been nominated
I'll-
as chair.
Someone is trying
I'll
to subvert
reach out
your
to Jeff.
nomination.
right.
Okay, Jimmy.
Okay. All right, the nomination for John Sefton for the position of vice chair. Roll call vote, please, Pam?
Dale Larson,
Aye.
John
I'll
Sefton,
Jimmy.
Aye.
I'll-
Jeff Buchanan.
yeah,
Aye.
Sarah King, Terry Pomper.
Aye.
I will.
And
yeah.
that vote passes
Thank you.
unanimously, so congratulations, John, and glad to be there. Uh, Folks on the telephone, this is Chairman Dale Larson. Please mute your phones. We are trying to conduct the meeting now and we hear some extraneous conversation going on. So if you wouldn't mind muting it to not interfere with the order of the business, please. Thank you. All right, item number 3, the consent agenda. And this is obviously for the majority of you on the phone. Items 3A through 3D are noticed as consent agenda items to expedite action. Documentation concerning matters on the agenda may be reviewed in the board meeting packet, which we all received, and at the Arizona State Parks and Trails office. The board may take one vote to act on all of the items or may remove an item for further discussion. Items not removed from the consent agenda will be considered in one motion. Items removed for clarification or discussion by the board will be acted on as appropriate. And for the members, just so in terms of education, all of these items have already gone through a very worthy review process from staff to the respective advisory groups leading up to AORC, which Vice Chairman Sefton sits on as well. And as you can see, all of them have been recommended for funding. So would any board member like to pull an item out of the consent item out and have it considered separately? Hearing none. With that in mind then, is there a motion to approve the entire consent agenda?
Mr. Chair, Jeff Buchanan, I move to approve the entire consent agenda as presented.
Motion is on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion seconded by Board Member King. Any discussion? Hearing none.
Mr. Chair, real quick.
Yes.
I think that it is important to recognize that as serving on AORC as well, I did have the chance to review all of this information and receive the presentation from staff. And I'd like just the record to reflect the amazing work that staff continues to do in compiling and working with the different agencies that are applying for these funds. It is really an honor to see smaller and more diverse towns and cities, Pima for one, and Snowflake, and these other areas that are out and across the state of Arizona. So with that, conclude my comment.
Well, thank you, John, and also thank you for your leadership on AORC. You guys go through all of these grants, and to Jeff and Mickey, I know, who's playing hooky today, we really do appreciate the work that all of your staff members do on all these grants. And to all the people on the phone, thank you for taking the time. All right, Pam, with that, roll call vote for the entire consent agenda.
Yes. Dale Larson,
Yes.
John Sefton,
Yes.
Jeff Buchanan,
Aye.
Sarah King,
Aye.
Terry Palmer.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you all very, very much. All right. Now, item number 4. Oop. Let me get up to that one.
Through all of these.
There we go.
All right. State Parks 2025 Trails Plan, Dawn Collins, which I'm glad to hear because actually engaged with this process.
Yes. Can everybody on the phone hear me? I'll try to use my big girl voice. So thank you all for having me here today. I just wanted to let you know what's going on with the 2025 Trails Plan. We have some exciting movement going on. So Pam, if you wouldn't mind, just thank you for doing this for me too. I appreciate it. So surveys. We have been working on revising the surveys. We have added some questions to it. Sadly, we have not been as good about taking away questions, so the survey's gotten a little longer. But we are finalizing those surveys. They are programmed. They have been pre-tested several times, and the feedback has come back from panel members, and so we're integrating that in. We are really hoping we will be able to launch next week. This is our goal is to launch next week with the public survey. So that would be the random sample survey and our invested user survey. The land manager survey will be not far behind. So by March, we will be launching land managers. All of those surveys and supporting materials. The supporting materials include things like our press releases. We have some sample social media posts that we're going to be making available to all of you so that you can use your networks and share this information with your networks and ask them to participate in these surveys. So all of those will be translated into Spanish as well. So when you get an email saying, we've launched the survey, you will find some attachments that you can use for your purposes to reach out to all of your networks, and we're hoping that you will do that to make sure everybody gets a chance to weigh in that would like to. Okay, so I jumped ahead. And just to let you know, the request for proposals for mobile data collection, we've gone through several processes with that. We found that we did have to go to RFP. We are working on that right now with our procurement team and Asset. So the Arizona
Strategic
Enterprise Technology. Thank you, Sarah. I was going to be stuck there. So I am being advised by all of those people on this process, and we are keeping it moving along. And so, next slide, please. So there are a couple different ways that I would like to ask the board to kind of help me to spread the word about this effort. One of the things that we are doing, because the survey did get a little bit longer, we are including questions about e-bikes for everybody this time. We are including questions about other powered mobility devices. And so because we have added some questions that we think are really important, the survey got a bit longer, we're trying to provide some really high value incentives so that our survey doesn't stretch on into like 9 and 10 months because it's so long. So we have gotten some great participation from partners so far. Our Arizona State Parks and Trails, of course, will be providing some survey incentives. The Arizona Office of Tourism has been kind enough to donate 2 staycations, 2 really fun-sounding staycations up north. Pin Drop Trailers has said that they would be willing to set up one of their trailers at one of our parks for a stay, a 2-night stay, so they're participating as well. Trophy Light has donated some money, as has Southern Arizona Hiking Club. So we have some really widespread participation. We're very excited about it. But also, if you have people in your network that you think would be interested in providing some incentives for this survey process, we would be very, very happy and grateful. So Matt Everhart has been kind of leading the charge in terms of our survey incentives. I have his contact information on the slide. So if you talk to somebody or know of somebody, please contact him. He will be working with you. When we launch the public surveys, we will be sending out various social media posts, etc., saying, highlighting some of those fantastic prizes that drawing prizes that people can win. And we will also put those on our website as well, so our partners will get acknowledged in that way. And so here's some of the examples of some of the high value incentives that have worked in years past. Cash has several of the partners have provided checks which will allow us to buy some gift cards that we couldn't normally provide. So that's one way that you can all participate if you know of anybody that you think would be willing to provide some incentives for the survey.
I think lunch with the executive director would be a
Absolutely.
really good incentive that would be appropriate, but that's just a suggestion.
Yes.
I will donate to send our executive director to Jack in the Box.
With the longest of value. We'll put that on our list. Value. There is no value. How can you value that? Okay, so another way that we would like to invite board members to contribute are, we are always looking for accomplishments to highlight that are related to the 2020 Trails Plan priorities. So if you guys know of some really exciting trail accomplishments since the 2020 Trails Plan, we would love to hear about them. We would love to highlight them on our webpage, in the document. We really want to amplify and communicate wins, that's going to be an effort that we're going to be engaged in many different areas. But this is one of the opportunities to do that. So we are looking forward to highlighting some of the work our partners have been doing in the last 5 years. If you know of any of those kind of successes that you really want people to know about, yeah.
Do you want me to jump in now, or should I just email you?
Go ahead and jump in now.
Just a comment, there's been a lot of work done lately near where I live in Patagonia,
Okay.
on the Arizona Trail, and creating additional bypass
Okay.
around the town. And now there's quite a bit of work going on about creation of a new trail, connecting both Patagonia and Sonoyta. It's a lot happening there, much of it under the banner of the Arizona Trail Association.
Okay. So if I reach out
But
to them.
the major expense, they get a lot of work done through volunteer effort to actually create the trail, but major expenses have to do with gates, the miniature cattle guards, all these kinds of things. But they seem to be doing a lot of work
Okay.
and a lot of positive feedback from participants.
That's fantastic. I also have a survey link here, so if you guys on your drive home or once you get home, if you are sitting down to dinner, in the shower, wherever you do your best thinking, and you think of somebody that you think really needs to be highlighted and deserves recognition, we have a link here that you can go to. It just asks you, who is the organization, what of these priorities is it most closely related to, and you can provide information that way as well. You can call me, you can email me. I don't, however you want to give me that information, we really want to focus on successes.
Certainly you can profile what happened last week, even though the trail was a little slippery and we didn't actually go on it, but the Rockin' River
Yes.
State Park Trail, and I'm sure you'll have lots of pictures, and particularly the recognition to Janice, I think would be really appropriate for that, so that, I'm guessing there will be pictures if there weren't pictures last week.
And I have just one more comment. We have a couple that stayed with us last week from northern Idaho.
Okay.
And they came down here to backpack and hike the trails and escape the snow, actually. But in doing so, they spent a lot of time in our neck of the woods. And right now they're staying at Kentucky Camp and backpacking out of there. I sought some specific feedback on behavior of other people on the trails. And literally every person, whether they were on horseback, on a bicycle, or walking, understood the rules and followed them. So no conflicts.
That
And
is
I think
great
I
feedback.
attribute that a lot to education. So.
Get
That's
that quote
fantastic.
on your
Yes.
plan.
I'm gonna get it out of the notes, thank you. You know what, of all of the successes, we usually get like a trail was created or one was maintained or reopened or something, but we don't often hear about good behavior, so thank you for sharing that. We'll definitely be able to highlight that. Finally, one other way that you can contribute if you're interested is we are always looking for photos, some like nice photos to put into the Trails Plan itself. So, and we need people on horseback on trails, we need hikers, we need mountain bikers, we need people in 4x4s, people in side-by-sides, so dirt bikes, all of it. So if you have some photos that you would like to submit, I do have some criteria that I will send out to the board, and let us know who to credit for those as well. You can send those to trailsplan@azstateparks.gov, and we would be happy to be able to use those in our trails plan. So that we have kind of a wide variety all across the state of kind of some of the experiences people can have.
Oh,
There we go.
So, one other thing that we are doing in the Trails Plan Working Group is we have kind of created these action teams, we call them action teams, where people can go and talk about some kind of timely issues like e-bikes and emerging technologies. There's a lot of different information out there about e-bikes. Youth engagement is another one of those action teams, trail access for all, coordination of land managers, and accessibility and inclusion. So those teams are talking about kind of what are the current issues related to these different topics, and then where would we like things to be five years from now when we go to do our next trails plan, and what are some possible solutions to get there. And we're kind of looking for some low-hanging fruit solutions all the way up to this would really require coordination of land managers type solutions. So we're hoping to be able to highlight each of these groups throughout the trails plan, because these issues have risen to the top as being very important to trails communities.
Dawn, I know that the governor mentioned it last week, her proposal on the 200 miles. Can that actually be put into this as far as a proposal on that plan? Because I think it speaks to what a lot of people are looking for, and I believe that's hiking trails, correct? Or is it multi-purpose?
Non-motorized.
Non-motorized, right. So that, I think to feature that would be certainly an opportunity here.
Very exciting, yes. Yes.
Dawn, is that Trails Plan logo new?
It is.
Who did that?
Gecko, well, Ken Sliwa. We call
It's
him.
really nice.
Isn't it lovely?
Yeah,
Yeah, and
it's
he's done all
great.
the banners and everything too, so
Yeah,
we have a
it's great.
talented team.
Don, real quick, are we particular to separate out like urban trails or municipal?
We have not separated those out.
So perhaps something, because along that line, we're at a conflict with e-bikes and speed limits and things along, so like in particular, my day job, we have canals
Okay.
and trails along those canals. We have agreements with the likes of SRP and others. But all of our surveys are really geared towards walking, so there's this context here that even in an urban environment, green belts, that type of thing, that I wouldn't want to lose sight of that important nature, because those are also a connection to nature in many cases. So I see how it could be taken out of the larger context of trails in Arizona, because we're really thinking about, the major hikes or biking or motorcycle off-road, all that type of look. But there's an important, if it doesn't happen here, I would like to see us, because I think there's a correlation to the funding, but also when we think about policy. So in these areas of e-bikes and emerging technologies, the infrastructure that goes into some of the more developed or infrastructure heavy trails, like a line along a canal, right? There's a lot of things that go into that. Some of our other areas, like along flood control basins, right? There's all kinds of dynamics that go into that, but for the vast majority of time, they can be very well used, right?
We are including multi-use paths
There you go.
in language in our trails plan, which is new this year.
Great.
And we do have some working group members who are particularly interested in kind of those multi-use paths and how do you blend e-bikes with walkers and dog walkers and skaters and e-scooter users. And so yes, we do have some language. I'd be happy to share the survey with you today just so you can see kind of how we're asking about that. Anybody else have any other questions about our action teams or anything else? Okay. Onward. So this is my typical, with every update you get to see again, we do have a trails webpage devoted to the trails plan. I'm trying to provide updates to that as we go to let people know kind of where we are in the process and what they can do to get involved. As soon as the survey is live, we will put the survey link up on that webpage as well. So please, if you have any questions about the trails plan, please go to that page, or if you think there's information that should be on that page that is not, I would love to hear that also. And then once we launch that, we will just try to send everybody that we can to that webpage to take the survey. So this is also a place where you can send people to take the survey if you don't have a social media post handy or.
Dawn, are
yes.
the Rails to Trails advocacy rep, I think is either here or was here the other day.
Okay.
And her name is Elle, and I drawing a blank on the last part, but I know she had you down
Okay.
because they are really in an advocacy relationship on trails. And my guess is they would like to either be identified or have you linked to their website that this is happening on. I think Arizona is sort of one of their best practice states that they are really trying to help profile on trail management, trail maintenance and the like. So I can get you her information, but I was thinking, Sarah, did you hear that she was here? I can't remember. Jen Hancock was the one coordinating this whole thing. And I know she had, AOT was there with Nina.
Oh, right.
And I mentioned you guys, so we'll get her contact information because they have federal funds available. They're doing a lot with Rails to Trails that would be appropriate.
And also, if this webpage evolves like the SCORP one did, we created, as we went along, we heard about a lot of more resources that people could use in regards to kind of SCORP priorities. And so we created a resources page specifically linked to the SCORP. So we could potentially do that for a Trails Plan also, and we would love to have their information.
Get you her contact.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so, as always, I am always available to you with any questions that you might have or feedback that you might have, any photos you might have or best practices or, so please reach out if anytime.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, this is exciting. I mean, trails, it's considering what golf used to be, this is what it's all about now, is trails. I mean, that's the big thing for sure, and the economic impacts of it and the like. But what Vice Chairman Sefton had said about it is this sensitive balancing act between motorized versus non-motorized and how that is going to be taking over. And staff obviously reported on what happened during COVID when we were invaded literally by California people coming on over and then just not.
In a nice way.
But clearly the behavioral relationship is being tested, and so thank you, John.
Yes, no, thank you very much for letting me.
All right. Next up, unless there's any other comments, questions? Next up is the legislative update, and the presenter is Brittany Hudson, local TV star. Going to be able to come up here and talk about.
I'm going to sit down because, as you can see, I'm having another baby soon, so.
Not today.
Not today. Maybe later, hopefully later, not right now.
Yeah, board meeting, remember.
That's right.
Yeah. But this will actually be the one and only time that I'll be before you guys. I won't be here for a few months, but I will be sending out or having someone send out legislation summaries so you guys can keep up with all of the legislation going on and the updates. So I'll just start with the 2024, the first bill on the sheet, and let me know if you have any questions, and I'll go over kind of some of the issues. So House Bill 2021, Conservation Easements and Lieu Payments. The holder of a conservation easement shall make annual payments of monies in lieu of taxes on the reduction of value of an original parcel caused by the placement of the conservation easement. And it will be retroactive from December 31st to present. So just in my notes here, the reason why this is an issue, just going back 20 years ago in '98, there was a Growing Smarter Act, and it authorized that the State Parks Board was to grant award grant monies from the Arizona Land Conservation Fund for the conservation of open spaces within or near urban communities, sorry. So the grant recipients were to convey a conservation easement to state parks in exchange for these Growing Smarter grant monies. And the organizations who received these grants were required to sign a contract with the Parks Board stating that they will convey an easement to the state parks. So our agency holds these easements. And so if this bill does go through, this would cost our agency a lot of money. it would be a huge fiscal impact to our agency. We do have some numbers floating around, but I don't want to give you a specific exact amount until we have those numbers. But this bill did go through Land, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs in the House on Monday, and it passed 7-2. This should have been a party line vote, and I think the vote counts got a little weird from the governor's office, so it would have been 5-4, but instead it's 7-2. But everyone knows that it's not the best bill, and it's gonna cost some agencies a lot of money.
So Brittany, I've got a question for both this one and the next one.
Sure.
I don't know if you can share or you know what's behind it, but honestly, it seems to me, and you know, I know that I'm quick to become a devil's advocate, but it seems to me that these are paired together to try to make it harder or more frustrating or adding to the bureaucracy for somebody who might want to apply for a conservation easement. It seems like this is meant to discourage that. So is that a good read? Can you tell us what's behind it?
Chairman and board member, I believe so. But I know in committee, the sponsor of the bill just said that she's trying to stop these easements from reducing the property value because easements lower the property values of, lowers the value of the property. That was her explanation.
I don't think that's.
The taxes, yeah. So that was the explanation. I don't know further what's behind that. I don't know if I want to speak to, you know, what someone else thinks or what the sponsor thinks, but that was the explanation from the committee. And Bob, I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members, that we've reached out to the sponsor to sit down and talk with her, so I think maybe we'll get some more information from her, but also Brittany's been working with our team to figure out what those numbers are, and they're substantial. They're our preliminary figures of what we would have to pay in lieu of taxes is approaching 8 figures, so, which is not financially feasible. So we're gonna meet with the sponsor to see. We've met with her before. She's got concerns about, even during our sunset audit, about the state, you know, purchasing lands, fee title, and how we're approaching that, but I don't think that this was contemplated, particularly in the Growing Smarter Act. It was voter approved, and at the time when all this went down with the board, I don't think any of us were here, but I think it'll make people think twice about buying a conservation easement from a private landowner. In Growing Smarter's case, you're talking about state trust land is what that was. It was never in private ownership. So I think Brittany's reached out, so we're gonna try to meet with her and figure out what the motive is here, but also the financial burden that's gonna place just on us, but there are other agencies that hold conservation easements as well. And non-governmental organizations that hold conservation easements. If you think about all the habitat conservation plans that have been signed over the years, all of those will be brought into that, and it's the holder of the easement that has to pay the inland taxes. So.
So Bob, just a request along the way. I know there are limits to what you can do when it comes to engaging the legislature on things like this, but there are a lot less limits placed on us.
Right.
And so what I'd like to know is, I don't want to create a science project here for you, but I am willing to engage, and I think probably our other board members would be willing to engage, but we need to know the rest of the story.
You bet.
What's this about? What's the potential impacts on both the positive and negative side or whatever? And so how can we advocate for a considered position that's well informed?
And I think that's a great point, and that's what we're trying to compile, is make sure we have the right information. Brittany did testify as neutral in the position at the request of the governor's office, so she did testify, and then again reached out, basically made the offer to meet with the sponsor and provide more of that information. So as soon as we pull that together, we'll make sure you're all informed of all of that.
And only to echo Board Member Buchanan's comment, I think as a board, we should be engaged in these kinds of issues and taking positions and the like. I mean, that's part of our mission as good stewards. So as this unfolds and as you see some real question marks on it that we can be involved in, please let us know, including attendance at hearings, et cetera, so that we can be able to do that with, not just with this, but any of them that have these kinds of negative effects with it. I think that'd be very appropriate. And I'm sure getting the information to our advisory groups, the ASCA, all of them would be appropriate, so keep
And
us informed.
I know this bill will probably go to the Senate for a hearing as well, so we can keep an eye out on that. And
Please
then
do.
you can go and watch or tune in if you need to.
Okay.
Okay, House Bill 2022, as Member Buchanan was mentioning, this is the holder of a conservation easement shall maintain the easement property free of noxious weeds, Russian thistles, and blowing dust that create a threat to health or safety. So this could also be an issue for us because it may be an impact if we can't modify these agreements that we have. And then we're gonna end up being responsible to remove these weeds and all these plants on all these easements. So this was assigned to the same committee, House Land, Ag and Water, or Rural Affairs, and met on Monday, and this passed out of committee 5-4. So it was party line vote. House Bill 2319, Appropriation Heritage Fund. This one would appropriate $10 million from the general fund in fiscal year 24 and 25 to the Parks Heritage Fund. This one has been assigned to House Approps Committee but has not received a hearing. And I'll just keep going. House Bill 2593, this is actually a new bill that I added to the updated version of the bill tracker here. So this applies outline requirements relating to public health records request timeframes. So the public records request timeframe would be 5 days. And it asserts that an entity that willfully or intentionally refuses to comply with the procedures for a public records request will receive a penalty of $500 or at most $5,000. So we're watching this because it will require us or our communications team to complete a request. And if someone didn't believe that someone thought we did it willfully or intentionally didn't respond in 5 days, then that could be an issue with us and we would have to pay a fine. We don't have a ton or a lot of concern with it, but we were just watching it. So.
But isn't that, I mean, this is a change, wasn't there something proposed last year where it was like every day you paid a horrendous penalty and it got, the downside of, understand that people would want us to respond in a timely manner, but you can also get crippled by public records requests. And if they're weaponized, if you know what I mean, and they're used against you this way, that cumulative effect could have been horrendous. So this is kind of a step back from that.
Remember, it is. There was a similar bill last session that didn't make it all the way through, so it's coming back.
Just for my own information with Nancy here too, my background always was when these kinds of public notice requests came through, we would always then work with the law department, or in this case, the Attorney General's office, who would really be the lead in terms of getting the information from the respective agency. So I would think the Attorney General's office would not support this because it gives them this tight time frame of 5 days or whatever it is that these areas are. But don't you in effect then kind of represent, if we were to get those sorts of requests, wouldn't the AG's office be the ones that would actually be the compliant, or is that Bob that actually responds?
Well, the agency responds to the public records request, and I'm glad to hear today's update, but I, can't give any kind of position of the AG's office on it, but I'm glad to know that.
And just in terms of protocol, I mean, Bob would then call upon the AG's office, right? I mean, isn't that the usual, or can you do it independent of legal counsel's help? And I'm not talking about anyone in specific, I'm just running the protocol.
I can speak to the process, and so our team would take those in. It just depends on the nature of the request, and if it needed legal review, then we would engage with Nancy for review of that, and And as you know, these can really vary in size and scope. They can be one email or years and years of documentation.
I mean, a request could say, I want emails from the last 5 years of such and such. I mean, that's something you can't turn over in a week's period of time. Okay, thank you.
So we're definitely watching out for this one, but this one passed, it was assigned to House Government Committee and it passed unanimously, and it also passed through the caucus. But I do know that there are some issues with the governor's office with this and with ADOA. So they're watching out for this as well.
Okay.
House Bill 2637, State Lake Improvement Fund drones. So we have SLIF coming back. State Lake Improvement Fund should also be used to fund the purchase of drones to clean plastic, algae, biomass, and other floating trash from lakes and waterways. This would also be used, or SLIF monies would also be used to fund the purchase of drones by law enforcement agencies and fire service agencies for the purpose of search, rescue, and recovery operations. So the note that I have here for you all is the size of the drone. We don't know how large the drones would be. We don't know how dangerous they would be, if they're going to be underwater. It could affect, boaters, skiers, whoever's in the water. So that's an issue with some of the agencies and Game and Fish as well. But this did pass out of House Land, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs Committee on Monday, and it passed out unanimously. This is a majority leader bill, so I'm sure this will be pushed forward or pushed through.
Pretty. If an agency were to apply with this as a project, there's nothing that dictates that we couldn't award that, right? If the project warranted, it's all through the typical process. So is this even necessary?
I don't think so. I think our folks looked at it. I mean, we funded remote operated vehicles, underwater cameras, robots, basically. I don't see why drones wouldn't be eligible. It's a tool for law enforcement, search and rescue, but just like a boat or a jet ski or anything else. So yeah, it could be funded. I don't know, Jeff, if we received any.
We have not to this point, but yeah, from my understanding of the bill is it just makes these eligible for funding, so doesn't seem to be too big of a deal on our end.
Okay.
I do know there's and the majority leader may be working with a lobbyist, I believe, who, might make these drones or works with a company who creates these drones, so that could be it too. House Bill 2804, Tribal Land Acknowledgement. So this will require a public school, university, community college, state or local park, or library or other state and local government in consultation with Native American tribes to display a Native American tribal land acknowledgement plaque in visible locations in a public area of a building that is accessible to the public. So this was assigned to the House Government Committee, but it has not received a hearing. I don't know if it will, because the House bills and Senate bills are there are no more committees next week, and then crossover week, all those bills cross over to the next chamber. So most of these bills that don't receive a hearing probably won't at this point, unless they get on some type of way with an amendment or something. House Bill 2879, Income Tax Credit Historic Preservation. This was the same bill that came up last year. It didn't receive a hearing, so this year I don't think it's going to do the same. But this would just require the State Historic Preservation Officer to receive applications and evaluate rehabilitation of certified historic structures for the purpose of income tax credits, which would be similar to the federal tax program that we have today. Senate Bill 1005, Public Monies, Ideology Training Prohibition. So this has to do with DEI. This came up last year. This went through the Senate, all the way through the Senate, and it's going to the House. Last year it did the same thing, and then it stopped at the House. So I don't know if this is going to make it either. But this would require public entities, including our agency, not to engage in DEI or fund any DEI initiatives.
On that note, and I discussed this with Dawn, in the Trails Plan, obviously accessibility and inclusion. And in the SCORT Plan, accessibility and inclusion were identified, and I think the word of caution here is just to be able to use language related to that would not in any way upset what may or may not end up being a law on this. So I think it's more semantics than it is the intent on it, but I think we just have to be careful how that is approached so as not to get somebody's ire up because we use the term DEI rather than another less political sensitive terminology. It's silly, but unfortunately that's what we're in right now.
Well, and Brittany, to clarify, I think, I'm not sure if this is the bill or not, but it was really is DEI race-based training, sort of, by agencies. I'm not sure if that's what this is versus we're trying to build a trail that is inclusive of Americans with disabilities or something like that. I think that's what this, okay.
Okay.
And what some of the committees in reference are doing is these agencies are going for reauthorization. They're getting embedded in their reauthorization language that you will not, Department of Transportation
Just went
through and it was peppered all over with this. And so I think that was the intent, but I don't think it's going to affect us. I think we try to do everything for everybody, so, but we'll continue to track it.
All right, just a few more here. Senate Bill 1045, public restrooms, feminine hygiene products. It just ensures that hygiene products or feminine hygiene products are provided at no cost in all women's and gender neutral restrooms at each state park and historical monument. This was assigned to the Senate Government Committee, but it has not received a hearing.
Thank God.
Senate Bill 1052, all-terrain vehicles. So this increases an all-terrain vehicle from 2,500 to 3,500 pounds. Or less, the maximum unladen weight of an all-terrain vehicle. So passed out of Senate Transportation, 6-1, and passed through House or Senate caucus.
Do you know who's behind that? I don't mean people, but I mean like, this is like Polaris and all those people
Yeah.
trying to push this, right?
Yeah, this came up last year and it didn't make it through, so they're bringing it up.
I remember you mentioning that last year.
Senate Bill 1055, Off-Highway Vehicle Study Committee extension. So this just continues that OHV study committee for another year, and it repeals May 31st, 2025. This passed out of Senate Transportation unanimously and also Senate caucus. So this is just that same study committee that Bob is on. It just extends for a year.
And you've met, right?
Mhm.
You met just with the other week, right?
Yeah, 4 times, I
Three,
think.
4 times? Yeah, 4 times.
Very good.
Senate Bill 1128, state agencies payment cryptocurrency. This always comes around. So a state agency may enter into an agreement with a cryptocurrency service provider to provide acceptance or to allow cryptocurrency to be an acceptance for payment. This passed out of Senate Finance 4-2 and Senate Caucus, but it never goes. Senate Bill 1176, appropriation Arizona Trails Fund. This just appropriates $250,000 from the state general fund in fiscal year 24-25 to the Arizona Trail Fund. So this one comes around every year, and this will probably be in the budget. This it did pass through Senate Natural Resources unanimously, and also the Appropriations Committee 7-3. Senate Bill 1365, state agencies cash payment acceptance. This just allows a state agency to accept cash and money orders, and this was assigned to finance, passed out 5-2. This comes up every year as well, and it doesn't make it past the Senate. Another one that has not received a hearing, but we're watching it just in case, Senate Bill 1552, outdoor-based therapy programs. So this allows an outdoor therapy program to be established in the Department of Health Services to provide grants for outdoor environmental, agricultural, natural resource-based therapy for all citizens of the state, but it also requires our State Parks Board to establish an advisory committee and assist, with the advisory committee with the Department of Health. This was assigned to Senate Natural Resources, but it has not received a hearing. So I don't know if this one will go through or not, but we'll watch it. Senate Bill 1725, state agencies tribal liaison. So this would just allow all state agencies to employ a tribal liaison from an actual tribe. This was assigned to Senate Government Committee, but it has not received a hearing as well. And the last one on the list is SCR 1038, Arizona State Parks Heritage Fund. So this is really the same as what the Heritage Fund used to be a long time ago, where it's a referendum. It goes back to the voters on the proclamation of the governor. It allows 10 million to be deposited in the State Parks Heritage Fund from the lottery, like it did back in 2000, before it got swept in 2007 or 2008. So this was assigned to Senate Natural Resources, and it did pass Senate Natural Resources yesterday, and I was not able to get the actual vote count, but it did pass. And then it has to go through the Senate Appropriations Committee.
I was just gonna say, I mean, it's 10 million every year, but what does it end up at? Was it 5 the first time and then what, 3 this current one? I can't
Yeah.
remember the math.
Yeah, well, it's been coming as grant funding now every year, so this would go back to the voters and allow this to
As
come from the
permanent.
lottery as permanent.
Right.
So it would just trickle down from the lottery fund.
Well, glad to see it's still active.
Well, yeah, it'd be referred to the ballot by
Yes,
the
yes.
legislature. If it goes to the ballot and then gets approved, now it's protected under the Voter Protection Act, so it cannot be swept.
Right.
Which is what happened last time, was
Exactly.
it passed before, so that this, you know, referring it to the ballot is a lot cheaper than going to the ballot proposition is, so.
Well, that is it for all of the bills. I just wanted to give an update on, I don't know if you were gonna talk about it or anything, but just with board appointments, I know that Board Member Palmberg, she needs to be reappointed. But I haven't heard anything. They're working on it at the governor's office. They have a lot of members to appoint and commission, so they're working on it. I don't know if it will be done this year or not, but I just wanted to give you an update on that.
I have a question, it's related, but do you have any feel for what's gonna happen this year with the legislature? Are they likely to extend like they did last year? Or ultimately, this affects things like confirmations and everything else?
So I've heard so many things. There's so many rumors. I heard 90 days, which is probably not going to happen. It usually does extend. I'm hoping it doesn't extend until July, but I can't give you an answer, concrete answer. But it's a little contentious down there this year, especially with budget shortfall and things like that. So it might go past 90 days. I'm pretty sure it will. But hopefully not. They have to get out there and campaign, so hopefully it doesn't go until the middle of the summertime.
Brittany, first of all, thank you so much for this thorough report and obviously best of success. Just to put into metrics, how many bills are aggregate proposed before it finally gets out of, isn't it almost like close to 1,000?
Oh yeah, I don't know the exact number, but it is. I mean, between House and Senate, there's so many bills.
And out of that
And
comes
a
what
month.
you are looking at right now that may or may not get a hearing on it, so.
So I have other people that in the agency who, if they find a bill, like House Bill 2021, I didn't even know about the Growing Smarter Act, and then Mickey told me about it, and then we started digging into it. So everybody helps me out, and the ones that I can't find, somebody else finds. So we just added to the list.
Thank you, Brittany.
Thank you.
And for those of you who didn't see her on television, she is a food and beverage star. All right, now we have actually the really good fortune of Game and Fish Commissioner Jeffrey Buchanan, who also then wears 2 hats as a board member, but we wanted to have Game and Fish provide an update since we're sort of the 2 anchors under the state authority for natural resources and the like. And Jeff, talking to Ty Gray, the executive director, has volunteered to come to us and.
Or been voluntold.
Boy, to tell a 3-star general to be voluntold, that's pretty good. Anyway, thank you very much, Jeff, and give us the agency overview.
Thanks. This is informational purely, but there's a lot of information here, and depending on my read of everybody, we may accelerate. But I wanted to encourage you to ask questions along the way. If you have them, the intent was not just to provide an update on a fellow state agency, but there's actually a lot of places where state parks and Game and Fish overlap, intersect. Sometimes they go in different directions on certain things. And it's helpful for all of us, I think, to get a deeper understanding of what goes on. I will say And Bob knows this intimately. This is a very different organization. Game and Fish is with a different purpose, but the rules that govern it, its funding and everything are just very different than what we do in state parks. So hopefully you come away with this or from this with a deeper understanding of what those differences are. So here's our authority, our vision. It's again, as you would imagine, it's focused on wildlife, and of course there's a lot to do with that when it comes to habitat management and things like this. But it is, on the Game and Fish side, we do a lot with recreation, but it's focused primarily on wildlife and then the intersection with recreation. You can see our mission. It's about conservation, not preservation, but about conservation, wise use, and the purpose is to make a difference for all of us. And the bottom line, you can see the pitch there on the bottom line. I will get into the weeds a little bit on funding, but how this works. There's some acts that go back, almost coming up on 100 years now, that play a great role in funding state wildlife agencies, and I'll explain how some of those things work. That's a Gila monster, by the way. So the commission, there's 5 members of the commission. It's different than the Parks Board. We each serve for a 5-year term. We get 1 new commissioner per year. Some of the rules, there's no more than 3 members can be from any one political party, and no more than 1 from any county. So it ensures a political and a geographic distribution of the commission itself, and the intent is to make this non-political. The other thing that is different, there's a number of things that are different, but how we come to the commission is through what's called a CARB, Commission Appointment Review Board. And so there are a series of people will apply to the governor's office of boards and commissions. They may neck it down based on eligibility, but then all of these members go through a Commission Appointment Review Board. And then after that process, that board must nominate at least 2 and no more than 5 people to go forward to the governor's office, who will then make the final selection. The point is, what they try to do is they try to ensure that qualified, knowledgeable people actually make it to the governor's office. So it's not, just somebody who should not be serving on the commission. Our relationship with the Game and Fish Department is very different than, say, the Parks Board. Our relationship is with State Parks and Trails. In fact, the director of the Game and Fish Department reports to the commission and is actually our sole employee. And then, all the department, of course, works for the director, but we hire and fire the director, and he, in this case, serves at our pleasure. We set policy, direction, approve the budget, these kinds of things. We get down into the weeds a little bit more when it comes to management of projects and some funding things. Certainly on the law enforcement side, we, the commission, make decisions. We have a meeting tomorrow in Yuma, and we do rotate around the state, but a couple hours of every meeting that we have is usually dedicated to looking at law enforcement instances and making decisions about assessing civil fines, revoking licenses, these kinds of things. So this is really what guides us. It's the North American model of wildlife conservation. And, we have a great picture of Teddy Roosevelt there, and that's where a lot of this came to head, but it even goes back further than this. If you go back to the Pilgrims coming to the, what was, before it was the United States, we learned, when we were in school, we learned about, stories about these people were seeking religious freedom. And that was true. They were also seeking the freedom to be able to hunt and fish and provide for their family. Because if you killed a deer in England in those time frames, that was the king's deer. And that was, in fact, a capital offense. You would be hung if you killed one of the king's deer. So from the beginning, one of our values has been that it doesn't matter how much land you own, how rich you are, you do not own the wildlife on that land. The wildlife is held in the public trust for all the people. And generally, it's state game and fish agencies that manage that wildlife. There are some exceptions, and we'll get into a little bit on endangered species, but also migratory waterfowl. If birds are crossing state lines, It's still managed by the state agency, but it's guided by the federal government. But it's not the wildlife, you know, it doesn't matter if you own the King Ranch, millions of acres, you can own all the cattle on it, you don't own those deer or turkeys or whatever the case may be. And those are owned by the people of the state, held in the public trust, and managed in this case by a state agency. So that it ties into hunting and angling opportunity for all. Wildlife is an international resource. This is particularly important when we talk about things like Mexican wolves, Sonoran pronghorn, jaguars, things that are currently hot button topics, and I'm happy to discuss any of those with you. And then the bottom one I think is also really important, which is science is the basis for our policy. And how we make these management decisions is based on science. We have a very active research department, and in fact, the science doesn't inform just our own policy, but it informs policy throughout the United States.
Jeff, just out of curiosity, I know I serve on the White Tank Mountains Conservancy, and their mission right now is all about wildlife corridors on that. So is that something that the commission would have an oversight on in order to actually have an established wildlife corridor as it goes through all of these different jurisdictional lands?
And yes, and certainly as it relates to certain species. In fact, I'll give you a great book, or I'll suggest a great book to read. It's all about wildlife corridors, but really focused on apex predators. It's called The Spine of the Continent. It's focused on Rocky Mountains, but mostly grizzly bears up north and jaguars down south, but it talks about how they need connectivity between habitat in order to be able to survive. We're going to get into some details here, but I'll jump on some specific projects that we're working with Arizona Department of Transportation, which tie into the need for those corridors and how we can in fact prevent accidents, automobile to elk, for example, but also how those are important to the viability of populations.
Okay, thanks.
So here's some numbers. We have more than 820 species that we manage and are responsible for. So think about, birds, fish, mammals. Those are all amphibians. Those are all reptiles. Those are all part of it. Insects, however, are not. Insects fall under the responsibility of Department of Agriculture. I'll lay out a little bit later our regional offices. We have a number of hatcheries, wildlife areas, etc. 600 staff members. You see how many are biologists. In fact, every one of those law enforcement officers is also a biologist. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. And then a lot on this side of wildlife waters. And this is, if you didn't get this before, you're going to get beat up about it through the meeting itself. So we've had some reintroduction of extirpated species. A good example is the Mexican wolves. I'll dive into that. This here is a picture of a black-tailed prairie dog down in southeastern Arizona in my neck of the woods. They were extirpated, meaning that they were no longer present in this particular environment. And we've had quite a bit of success in both Cochise and Santa Cruz County reestablishing populations. What will come down the road is reintroduction of black-footed ferrets. Black-tailed prairie dogs are good for many things, but one of which is to feed black-footed ferrets. We'll get into that later if you want, but it's about bringing the system back in balance from what it was originally until man got involved and got rid of some of the species. So habitat, 73 million acres, you know all of this, but we have many partners and partnerships. And so if you take all the forest land, for example, all the national forest, we are still responsible for managing the wildlife on all that federal land. The exception are our Native American tribes. However, they're responsible for wildlife management within tribal lands. However, we do maintain strong relationships. We actually help out a lot. They help us a lot. There's quite a bit of partnership. I don't think we're going to dive into detail on Apache trout, but that's a great example. The White Mountain Apache, we have two native trout species in Arizona. One is only in our state, and that's the Apache trout. The Gila trout are also in New Mexico. But in the 1950s, the White Mountain Apache tribe, recognized the uniqueness of this particular species and how important it was to them, and they began a serious management effort. Along the way, our department, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the White Mountain Apache tribe worked together. And that fish was listed as endangered back with the creation of the Endangered Species Act, and just this last summer was taken off the list. And so we've now got healthy populations throughout the White Mountains, but that's an example, and it was a partnership. And certainly within tribal lands, the White Mountain Apache tribe is responsible for it. Here's probably more than you ever wanted to know on funding, but there are a couple of things that I do want to highlight. And the big issue is that sportsmen and women discretionary purchases fund most of this. License sales are a big chunk, but also 1937, there was an act passed in the United States Congress called the Pittman-Robertson Act. And what that does is that taxes all firearms, ammunition, archery equipment, and provides an excise tax. And then all of that goes into a big formula, and they distribute back to the states for management of wildlife. I think it was 52, several years later, there's a related act passed called the Dingell-Johnson Act, which actually does the same thing for fishing tackle, and then helps fund, management of waters and fish, et cetera. So you can see that there is a little bit. We do get some money coming in, actually, from our board occasionally on heritage funds and things like this, but the vast majority is funded by people who are buying a license or arms and ammunition. You can see a lot there on economic benefit. You would understand that as well from the recreational standpoint. It's focused on improving our quality of life as well as that and it's kind of, I look at our state parks board purpose in this, and it's very similar in that we're here for in this case, for the conservation of natural and historic resources and for the benefit of the people of Arizona. Well, this is about conservation of wildlife and the benefit of the people of Arizona. Okay, some challenges that we have. The first one is we have this acronym we use, all R3, which is recruitment, retention, and reactivation. And that's really about getting people involved in helping, in being involved and interested in wildlife, but also helping to fund us, frankly. And so, I mentioned, I'll just give an example. Again, in my neck of the woods where Sarah lives, there's a lot of bird watching that happens. Okay, well, bird watchers don't except when they buy a pair of binoculars, then they're contributing to wildlife management. They don't necessarily buy hunting licenses. But the people who are responsible for managing yellow-billed cuckoos and elegant trogons and everything else is the Game and Fish Department. So how do we get those people involved in this process to actually help fund the management of their recreational activity? That is a challenge. How do we, yes, Terry?
Do people at gun shows pay that tax for funding?
They do, yeah, all of those tax, anytime. I'm not sure about things when you buy gun components. I know that there's some loopholes potentially in the law. Not exactly sure, but if you buy a firearm, you're going to pay that tax to the federal government, and some portion of that will come back to us. But in any case, we have changing dynamics. If less people are out hunting or fishing, that's going to affect our funding and our ability to manage wildlife. We have in this city, for example, we have great success with our community fishing program. And it's about bringing people to fishing, an opportunity that's local, doesn't require a whole lot, but if we can get them interested and started, that actually helps manage the resources well.
Jeff, has that been brought to discussion about like no further expansion for the community fishing program? We just received notice that they're not going to be adding any more waters, and obviously costs have gone up significantly. So our partnership and our IGA with the municipalities is
I'm
challenge.
I'm not aware of a limitation like you just described, so I'd like to, once you get me offline, I know it's focused probably on Chandler. Let me get the rest of the story from you and I'll see if I can provide some feedback. Because we have continued to expand some of these, so I'm not sure where the disconnect is. The third one I think is probably the most important with the increasing urbanization in our state. It causes habitat loss, degradation, and fragmentation, and that leads directly to the question about connectivity. It causes some problems. You know, some things that are great green initiatives, I'll give you examples, solar farms, you know, big windmills. Windmills sound great unless you're a raptor. You know, if you were a Harris's hawk or a golden eagle, you evolved to look for prey down on the ground. You're not used to worrying about what might be in front of you. And so we lose thousands of raptors every year flying into windmills. So, you know, how do we work together? How can we in the Game and Fish Department help advise an energy company that's looking to build a wind farm? How do we help them site them in such a way that will have minimal impact on wildlife? Or same thing with solar farms. You know, you think of a solar panel, that's not a big deal. Yeah, but when it's acres and acres and acres, it can have a huge impact. We do have some issues with invasive species, you know, primarily on the aquatic side, believe it or not. Zebra mussels, New Zealand mud snails, things like this that are easily moved without intent, you know, from one water to another because they're on the hull of a boat or something like that. They can cause huge problems for our wildlife. We've talked here about OHV, but OHV, less of a direct impact on wildlife, but much more on the habitat and what happens there. And you see this picture here, bull elk, you know, obviously won't be a happy meeting engagement if that car hits that elk for either. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that and how do we work together to, oops, let me go back, avoid collisions and things. Here's some more issues we have, wildlife diseases. You may have heard of chronic wasting disease, which is a big issue affecting members of the deer family. Has not yet come into our state.
Nice.
But it's in Arizona, or it's in New Mexico and Colorado are the closest. So we're working hard to keep it out of our state and also have a system down if something does come in here, how do we in fact stop it? It's not really a problem for people, but it's a huge problem. It's 100% fatal, gets into the brain of members of the deer family. Elk and deer usually is what we think of. Human wildlife conflicts. We had some interesting cases this last year with both bears and mountain lions. I can talk about those in detail, but you know, we obviously want to manage the wildlife, but we also don't believe that man should not be in the environment. So how do we work together to minimize potential conflict? And some of these are, you know, when you get a lion who is habituated to people, you're never going to untrain the lion to eat cats or something, and this causes a problem. Obviously, we have some issues with what's going on with the climate, and of course, long-term drought, that affects the survival of our species, in this case, bighorn sheep. But what we've been doing to bring water to animals that need them, it's driven our costs up quite a bit. And then we have aging infrastructure. We have, believe it or not, the State Game and Fish Commission owns 37 dams. Well, that doesn't sound like a big deal until you realize that some of the infrastructure is really, really old, and the people below the dam wouldn't be happy if they failed. So we're working through some of that stuff as well. Yeah, the last one, special land designations. This is one I really need to give a shout out to both Senator Sinema's office and our governor's office. You know, we had went through the process last year with the designation of a new national monument in Arizona. I will say from this commissioner's perspective, I won't speak for the whole commission or the whole department, but anytime we have a special land use designation that limits the ability of our citizens to have access or something, generally, we're against that, or at least I'm against that. So let's go back to the National Monument. The National Monument took existing federal land, forest, U.S. Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management land and designated a monument. Our biggest concern from a commission perspective was that this potentially could lead to something, you know, national monuments lead in a sort of a natural way to national parks, which focus on preservation rather than conservation. And even though it wasn't the intent of the creation of this monument to limit hunting and fishing, we wanted to ensure that we could work together to preserve the right of our people to do that. So working with both the governor's office and Senator Sinema's office, all that language is in place. And really for the first time in the history of the United States, with the designation of this new national monument, it recognizes upfront the state's authority to manage wildlife, recognizes the importance of hunting and fishing. This is probably the best elk hunting and some of the best mule deer hunting in the entire state. And if they would have taken away that 1 million acres from the people in the state, it would have become a tough situation. So it's an example of how a special land use designation can be a problem, and then how can we work together to solve it. Here's our priorities. I think you have those in your handout. I'm not going to go through all of those. I will focus on number 7, promote fair chase. This is just an example that we are believers in promoting fair chase. So we're one of the few states that outlawed the use of trail cameras, just as an example for hunting in this particular case. So, you know, we believe that that there are limits, you know, to, we don't allow use of aircraft or drones or anything for spotting wildlife. Things like that, that we try to keep it met as a fair recreational opportunity. So we'll talk a little bit about wildlife management. What are the kind of things that we do? Top left is a pronghorn with a collar on. You have a stocking fish. I think that's I'm not positive, I think it's a Chiricahua leopard frog, which is an endangered species. We could talk about that. Or I think that's a burrowing owl, not a spotted owl. But we do all of these things. We work very closely. We're very actively engaged. And when you find what you might think of as a game warden, like I said, all those game wardens are also biologists, and they're responsible for all this stuff, not just the law enforcement side. So they're very engaged on managing wildlife. We have some endangered species in our state, and you can see that we've had a lot of great successes. So Sonoran pronghorn, they were listed in 2002 with 21 whole pronghorn in our state. This is a subspecies of pronghorn antelope. And you think about them down in the southwestern portion of our state, or south central, that's where they live. And right now we're up to 482. The bald eagle, we had 11 bald eagle breeding areas in 1978, and now we're approaching 100. So we've had a lot of great successes. We want to keep the common species common and recover those that are threatened and endangered. I talked about Apache trout. I think I'm going to talk next probably about Mexican wolves. So they were protected in 1976 under the Endangered Species Act, and we established with the Fish and Wildlife Service and the state of New Mexico and the White Mountain Apache Tribe, an organization that we come together and we work hard to manage these wolves. We started with 7 wolves, and we're now up to at least 241. And so it's a great success story. This is one of those, though, that we have a lot of constituents and we need to listen to everybody. And if you listen to the Cattlemen's Association, you're going to get a very different perspective than if you listen to the Sierra Club. Or if you listen to sportsmen. You know, sportsmen will have a divided personality. Some of them want to keep wolves away from elk calves, and some of them want to be able to hunt wolves. So, you know, there's a lot of opinions out there, but I'll give you an example of one that came up during my hearing, actually, to be on the commission. I got asked by one of our senators, well, how come we won't let wolves go north of I-40? And so the Mexican wolf is actually a subspecies of the northern gray wolf. And I don't want to have a biology class, but a species can reproduce and create viable young. So think about horses and horses, or donkeys and donkeys. But when horses and donkeys mate, they create mules, which are not viable. They can't reproduce. Well, so the Mexican wolf and the northern gray wolf are the same species. And there's northern gray wolves in Colorado and Utah. If we let the Mexican wolves go north of I-40, it won't be long before we don't have Mexican wolves anymore, because the subspecies will meet with the greater species, and pretty soon that genetic diversity will be done away with. And so we're keeping a barrier there, which was there historically, but whenever we track a wolf north of I-40, we trap him, it's usually him, we trap him and get him back down in the White Mountains to keep them south, because we want to keep those populations separate. This gets a little bit on the question on connectivity. You can see we've got some overpasses built on US 93. Those were targeting really bighorn sheep, and quite a bit east of Payson on Highway 260. On I-17, we've got some crossings, but we just got funded for a very large one. You see the third bullet there, $24 million. That's a project led by Arizona Department of Transportation, but guided by us. So we don't just say, hey, here's where we're having a lot of elk collisions. We actually track and collar elk, and we figure out where their movement patterns are, and we say, okay, this is where we need to have a crossing, and put one in so that the elk can get across the interstate, and we prevent them from crossing a bunch of miles on the north and south, in this case, of I-17. Allow them to cross here. Here's where they want to cross anyway, and we can keep people from hitting into them. On I-40, I've got a daughter that lives in Parks, which is just west of Flagstaff. And there's a section of I-40 between Flagstaff and Williams, really kind of focused on Parks, where we're going to put 2 crossings in. And it's for both, focused mostly on antelope and elk. We have crossings that are underpasses as well, but these particular ones have to be overpasses, because antelope won't go under a crossing. Elk will. Mountain lions, bears, they'll all go under a tunnel, but antelope will not. So we have to create an overpass. And the reason, part of it is to keep collisions from happening, but actually we have a genetic problem with antelope north and south of I-40. They've become separated, they're separate populations, and they're headed in different directions. So to ensure that we have good genetic diversity, we need to reintroduce them, if you will. I'm a little conscious of time here. I'll kind of go through these quickly. We actually have quite a bit of fishing waters. There's a little bit on the community fishing program. It continues to expand, so John, I need to get back to you. We have a lot of hatcheries. Mostly cold water is what we focus on. Trout, think of trout, but even Arctic grayling. Gila trout, Apache trout, rainbows, browns, and a grayling. But we also have some warm water capability as well. This gets onto the part, how do we reach out? How do we bring more people into the outdoor recreation world? We do a lot with our expo, with trying to bring everybody into opportunity to recreate. We try to go to communities where they are, rather than just require them to come to us. We've got a couple of slides here, but we spend a lot of time and energy as well on focus on non-hunters and non-anglers. Everything from presentations on snails in an area to hummingbird festivals, and again, quite a bit. And this is really, really important. This was one of my favorite, our partnership with the Mother Road Brewing Company. Out of Flagstaff, yes, we have a conserve and protect ale that you can buy.
There you go.
And we do a lot through publications, Wildlife Views magazine, TV shows, etc. We have a number of shooting ranges. We have 10 of them that are owned by the commission. The big one, of course, is Ben Avery, just north of Phoenix. But but quite a bit, and that brings people who may want to shoot, who are not even hunters, engaged with the sport. And when they buy ammunition at one of our places, of course, that's a good deal. It feeds back into wildlife management. On watercraft, last summer when we went out to Lake Havasu in August, great call by the way. We got on a boat and we talked about multi-jurisdictional issues at that time. And so we had state parks, maybe even Bureau of Reclamation, state of California, state of Arizona, obviously the county sheriff, but as well Game and Fish. So a lot of interaction with the different agencies, and of course we maintain on the Game and Fish side a pretty significant law enforcement capability. OHV we've talked about in here quite a bit. That continues to drive us, and we're on the Game and Fish side members of the same advisory panel that Bob is on from state parks. Lots of concerns about this, concerns about impacts on habitat, et cetera. I mean, concerns about the weight of the vehicle, all kinds of things. Trafficability on roads. So here's just a shout out on the law enforcement side. All of I talked about all our wildlife managers actually go through the academy or train law enforcement professionals as well, but they're biologists. What is a little different when I've done some ride-alongs with game wardens, their working assumption is that, the person that they're going to engage is having the best day of their life. And so it's, I also do work with our county sheriff. I just got to tell you, it's very different in terms of, assumptions and who's doing what and how are we going to bring these people in to be part of a solution instead of part of a problem. This is how we're organized, 6 regions throughout the state. I mentioned meeting locations, which is one that you heard me harp on about in here, but how do we get the meetings throughout the state? On the Game and Fish side, it's actually intentional. So we rotate which region we're going to meet in. And tomorrow we have a meeting in Human, Region 4. And next month it's in Oro Valley, just north of Tucson. So we rotate. It causes us to be on the road quite a bit, but it's a great way to get a better feel for what's going on in every single region and having an understanding. Here's a slide that develops a little bit on what I talked about with human-wildlife conflicts. And you can see quite a bit on the coyote and javelina side. Of course, the ones that we're really concerned about on the dangerous side is mountain lions and bears. And we do have a system to react when usually in concert with the county sheriff when we have problem bears or problem mountain lions. If you were to ask me what I thought the greatest challenge was to wildlife, it's really going to be it's about habitat management, which concerns come from urbanization. They also come from climate change and some of those. So how do we work together to do the best good for all? We may get, a huge amount of money that was helped raised by the Arizona Elk Society that's focused on habitat improvement for elk. Okay, but what we look for is, okay, how can we do the greatest amount of good with this money for elk, but all the other species as well? And what can we do to enhance it for essentially everybody? This is just if you're doing a science project, you want to look at how many acres a year we improve. It is quite a bit, and it takes a lot of work. This is something else we work hard, public access, and sometimes this is, we work hard to give access to state land, for example. And of course, when you have a rancher who has a grazing permit on state land, there can be conflicts of interest there. How much access do we give somebody who might be driving an OHV onto that land, and thus creating, damage? So we have to work together with the ranchers, with the recreational users and everything to try to increase access, but do the greatest amount of good for all. respect the ranchers. So we go through a deliberate process with the State Land Commission. When we have a rancher that wants a gate locked and closed, we go through that. In fact, we're looking at a bunch of them tomorrow. In detail, okay, are we gonna lock this? Is there alternate access? Are we gonna lock this and say, hey, you can move onto the state land, but by foot only, whatever the case may be. And if you don't know, if you have a hunting and fishing license in the state, you're authorized to access state land. So that's ultimately what this is about. How do we ensure that people can have access? And we also work with private landowners, and then we work together to get them help to manage waters or whatever the case may be. Here's a little bit specifically on water. Lots of catchments, lots of hauling of water, and of course all that costs money. We do get quite a bit. You see more than $900,000 in donations in the last almost 5 years, which actually helps fund some of this effort. Not completely, but it does do quite a bit. Done a lot. I'm not going to go into details, but we try to make things more simple on licenses, on stamps, on permits, and you can do it all electronically now. To include our watercraft registrations, it's quite a bit to try to make it as simple as possible. We have a draw that is, again, all electronic, and then just 2 years ago we introduced electronic tags, so you don't have to use a hard copy tag. We do a lot on outreach and education. We'll take owls or eagles or whatever to schools, and it's a great way to introduce a conversation. From this, I'll tell you, one of our problems that we have is adoption of desert tortoises. You may not know, in fact, for those of you who live here in Maricopa County, I just got to tell you, you live in great tortoise habitat.
It's true.
If you want a tortoise, we can get you one. So I live at about the max elevation, I think, naturally for where they live. And we took one on, and he's underground right now. But he'll come back out in the next month or two. But the point is, we have about 300 tortoises every year that we adopt out. And we do that because once a tortoise has been held captive, we never want them released to the wild again. And so some of this comes from illegal breeding operations, or somebody just turns in a tortoise. So we adopt them out. So you too can have one. And again, lots on marketing and how you can help. A Conserve and Protect campaign, again, we're focused on, this is about trying to help people understand how we manage wildlife, what's going on in this state, etc. And it's similar to the solicitation for feedback that we just talked about on state trails. Again, we do get some donations. We do have some public-private alliances, but most of our funding comes from sportsmen and women. And then if you don't have a subscription to this, I strongly recommend it. It's a great publication. There's things in there for everybody. Fishing, hunting, non-game, endangered species, etc. But great pictures as well. And we have a great calendar every year. On the volunteer side, we couldn't do it without volunteers, especially when it comes from mentorship on safe hunting programs, etc. And so that's the end of the presentation.
Very good, thank you.
You can drive again. Any final questions?
Jeff,
Oh, go ahead. No.
with the influx of people from other states, are the Arizona wildlife or the state wildlife agencies collaborating regionally? Are they?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. This is one, there's 48 states that are members of the same organization. The outliers are, if you're interested, are Massachusetts and Hawaii. But last month we revoked the guide license for somebody who's a resident of New Mexico. He has an Arizona state guide license and a guide license in New Mexico. And it happens automatically, but in this case we followed up just to make sure. The state of New Mexico, if we revoke his license for 5 years, he's now automatically revoked in New Mexico. So can't guide anywhere essentially in the United States for the next 5 years. And so we collaborate on those law enforcement issues as well as, wildlife issues. Believe it or not, we have had a moose in this state come down from Colorado. We've had a mountain goat come down from Utah. And, so when these things happen, we're not supposed to have mountain goats here. So how do we work together with Utah Game and Fish to get that goat trapped and returned to where it belongs instead of Fredonia, south of there, Jacob Lake or wherever it was, somewhere in that area. So we work very closely with the other states.
And then the public education aspect of that, and that's probably more of that impact, like.
Yeah, so, and again, I mentioned chronic wasting disease. So here's a concern. We have chronic wasting disease in deer and elk in New Mexico. So we work.
Everyone else has left the call.
Well, I don't blame you. So when we have if we work with the state of New Mexico to know which Arizona residents are gonna have a now non-resident license in New Mexico for hunting deer or elk. And then we will contact them and say, by the way, just so you're tracking, here's our state law. You can't bring bones, you can't bring a whole head back into the state for a taxidermist. Here's the requirement. So all the things that could potentially lead to an infection, we want to keep out. You can bring deboned meat, these kinds of things. And here are the rules so that, and we get that from the state of New Mexico. There'd be no other way to know who was from Arizona hunting in a different state. But we work together with the other states to do that.
Any other comments?
A quick question. The gate closures you mentioned, you're dealing with gate closures. Are some of those related to off-road vehicle?
Absolutely.
Most of them, I guess.
Yeah, many of them, but and then we also work on the education side with hunters. Okay, yes, you have access to this state land to hunt, but if you see new crops out there, let's be smart. Let's treat it with respect. Don't go trample things and everything else. But the gate closures, a lot of them come to the problem emanates from tearing up land because of OHVs.
Other thoughts or comments? So impressive, Jeff, really. I mean, I know you haven't been on the commission for all that long, but you speak as if you've been there for a long, long time. Your knowledge and breadth of information is a real credit to them, and we're just happy to share you, I guess, more than anything else. And I would ask Bob as well, because you're a product of this agency for it. Any thoughts and reflection of what Jeff had to say?
He nailed it. He's just like any tenured employee, probably more than me. I mean, I've been out of the Arizona Game Fish game for 10 years, but the one thing that he struck on was the role and the makeup and the organization of the commission structure. It is so unique in this country anymore. Politics has taken over. Commissions have been disbanded. They've been lumped. They've been merged. This commission system is so unique in this country. I mean, there's probably less than a handful that run like this, where they all did at one time. And it's to keep politics out of science and out of wildlife management. And they are truly an independent body. It doesn't matter who's governor. They still work, but they drive it. And how unique that is. But at one time, everybody had that system, but they've been falling off. Guard it with your life, because you can never get it back. This board operated under the same,
right.
Not too many years ago, was the same structure. Yeah. And not to say it's bad now, but other things come into play. Commissioners, I've seen commissioners in other states, particularly in Colorado, 5, 6 of them wiped off the map by a governor and reappointed, and you lose that consistency, you lose that connection to your customers. There's a whole bunch of things, but I think don't let that go unnoticed, how important that system is and how important it is to protect it at all costs. And I think with the sportsmen, the constituents, I think even the landowners in this state will defend that system. Just mention DNR at the Capitol. And it's kicking a huge hornet nest, but it's,
We've had some problems in some other states. I'll just leave it that opaque, but if you want to talk about them, we can. But where it's been very much political appointees, and then people who don't
Yeah.
understand what the impact of, we're gonna cut spring bear hunting out, well, okay, I may not wanna hunt bear or eat bear or whatever, but you gotta consider this. So from our perspective, I welcome non-hunters, non-anglers to be fellow commissioners. But again, there's a difference between a non-hunter and an anti-hunter.
Right.
And, somebody who's philosophically against hunting, if they're in charge of management of that department, you can see what problems that could create. And that's what we have going on in some of our states.
Well, again, thank you very, very much. Really appreciate it. Genuine presentation. All right. Let's go to future agenda items. Any board members have a particular issue that they would like to see come to the forefront here in the future meetings? Board Member Buchanan?
Just meeting location. I know
Yeah.
we're working on Tonto or somewhere, the extent to where we can
Yes.
meet somewhere. I thought it was, despite my sniveling about the heat last summer, I thought.
it was hot.
I thought it was a great trip, and it was a great opportunity for us to learn what really is needed.
Tonto is high on the agenda. Talk to Pam about that. The way they're listed is just for default purposes more than anything else, but yes. And working with Bob and now with Pam on board, all the coordination and the logistics, but yes, we do want to take it down the road. Noting that we have the fearsome five of us that need to make sure that when we do move it, we're able to have at least in person as well as online. But we want to be able to have that connection to the elected officials in that area like we did at Lake Havasu. That was wonderful. And would like to replicate that up in Payson for the same reason. So, any other particular items to bring up for the forefront? Hearing none. Executive Director's report on current events. Bob?
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, the biggest thing that happened, I guess, since our last meeting, obviously, is the opening of Rockin' River Ranch. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend there, but we had very capable deputy director run the show.
Yes.
And when you're dealing with all the staff, all of the public, the governor's office, her entire team, I think Pam helped out a little bit on this whole thing, but we're really, really proud, as I'm sure you are, that we got this park open. And it took a lot of work. It took a lot of coordination. It took, Sarah and I both were joking, half joking. We thought the place was cursed because of all of the issues that were happening. But to have that open, particularly in that weather, and to see that turnout, really is a testament to everybody, including this board, all the way down to our park rangers and capital program and procurement, and everybody pulled together on this to get this property open now for the public. And to let you know, the first weekend, obviously, the grand opening was on the 8th. There were 130 visitors there. That's not including park staff. So they were invited guests or publics, neighbors that we had invited, some of the local ranches and farms around. The next day, of course, the weather was really, really bad still. We had 17 on the 19th, but then on the 10th, when the weather broke, 104 people came in. And then on the 11th, 82 people came in. And I know, so we're talking about just about $1,300 in revenue was generated in just those few days. And we expect great things out of this. It's such a unique park if you haven't been there. It's very quiet. It's not a whole lot of infrastructure, but it's a get out, appreciate, how that property was farmed. You have the Verde River going through there. So it's a really neat place, but we just really wanted to highlight, and you had mentioned too, Chairman, about Janice Spiano. For those who've been around, the state and the Heritage Fund for the last 30 years, Janice has always been there. Janice has been the most staunchest supporter of the Heritage Fund, as well as the State Parks Board and all of our state parks, and to see her with you, Chair, and Vice Chair Sefton, with her plaque and then the naming of that trail after her. Obviously, it's the least we could do for Janice, but to see that smile on her face, many of you may not know, but Janice continues to be active on the Heritage Alliance Board, and she is at every meeting. She doesn't drive herself anymore, but she finds a way to get there. Come hell or high water, she is always there. But to see her there, of course, with the Governor Hobbs, her showing up as well. She was, I understand, very excited. Her team was very excited. It was coming down to the wire, but it pulled it off. And I really want to recognize Sarah. She was really the key linchpin in all of this. She may not have done shovels. Well, she organized a volunteer day the week before. She did shovel. Okay, sure, she does everything. But really getting the staff together, you guys know what it's like to open a park.
Oh my God.
And you need to be able to get everybody together, meet on a regular basis, check on action items, follow up on action, create new. She was really the one who led the charge. And so we would not be opening that. We would have not opened that without her leading the charge. So I really wanted to say thank you to you. And I hope that she can take a minute and look back. And it was not that long ago that we had lapsed appropriations. And I remember board member Sean Orm,
Yes.
getting really upset because of the
Sure.
budget. And so you all know how long that park has been sitting there, and finally to get it open, it's really cool. And
Which reminds me, have we reached out to her at all to let her know that this, or does she know about it? That'd be
I
good
don't
to.
think we did.
I have to look and see. I know we reached out to the initial committee that was involved, but I don't know that we reached out to former board members.
If I can help with that, I mean, I still have her email and everything, but it'd be nice. I was hoping maybe she could have been there. That would have been great.
Yeah.
I thought for sure
We
she
have
would
more
be.
stickers
Yeah.
too.
That's right. There's T-shirts for sale. There's all kinds of stuff. So, but anyway, we're really, really proud, monumental achievement. I don't think we were joking a little bit earlier. It's not all of us, board members or directors or even staff, get to see a park open in our tenure. But hopefully we have another one coming down the road here pretty soon in Chino Valley. That probably going to be a while before we open it, but anyway, we still have some issues we're working through on that one. But anyway, I wanted to put those pictures up. I don't know if you all had seen that. I think that's the only slide of pictures, but we do have a really good one that I should have gotten the PM for this, but it's with the governor, with all of our park
Staff,
rangers.
Yeah, it was really nice.
And yeah, they look very professional, and they're very proud as well. They should be. So other than that, that's really, I don't know how that I wanted to give, unless there's any questions for
Yeah,
you.
Bob, there was a slight mention of Havasu, who made the news with the bridge,
The second bridge that's
second
going in.
bridge. Is it the same spot on our tour we had talked about?
It is.
It will affect the state park?
Well, we had, our regional folks, our park manager and our chief of operations had a meeting yesterday with their consultant. But yeah, they're trying to put in an alternate bridge instead of the Linden Bridge that's gonna either cross or bisect part of Lake Havasu State Park. So I'm gonna wait to be briefed on that, but you certainly will pass on that information. But yeah, they're moving on it.
So London Bridges is falling down? Is that Sorry.
Yeah.
Couldn't
Well,
resist.
now that we're off the phone, you can say.
I think the bridge is fine. I think it's a traffic issue. I think it's what they're trying to do.
And just the sheer volume of those other properties back there, right?
Right.
All right, anything else, Bob? And again, we can only echo exactly what you said as far as the event is concerned. It was wonderful, Hank and the people there, and I don't know how many TV stations, obviously they follow the governor and there's that whole network going on, but in spite of the elements, it was incredible, it really was. And your deputy director is a wonderful driver in snow. Just to let you know.
Shovels, driving.
All right,
That's right.
current
That's
current
right.
events, any
Sure.
board members would like to present a summary of our recent experiences that they've got?
Just two quick comments, neither of which will be a surprise probably. Sonoyta Creek still has cows on it. So, I know there's a plan working with, Game and Fish and Sheriff's Department, but they're really causing damage down in there. And they're not there, they're not there with authorization, so we gotta get them out. So that's the first one. Second one, we had a plan, you remember, it might have been the last meeting where we had the Friends of the San Rafael
We
present.
were in December, right?
We were gonna have a meeting on February 1st. That, without going into a lot of detail, that got delayed. And then I'll talk to both Sarah and Bob afterwards about how we can reschedule that. So that is still a due out. And as always, I'm concerned about, I know we're gonna talk at some point about O&M funds, but about maintenance of facilities. And of course, what brought this to a head last year was the establishment of the headwaters of the Verde River, but without money to maintain anything. And so I'm just concerned about how far we're stretched and what are we actually gonna spend it on.
Right, fully agree, and I know Bob is putting together because of the budget situation and with the state budget and an uncertainty with the presumed gap of revenues coming in, so yeah, absolutely, we're gonna dedicate a meeting just to the O&M relationship to it, so. Okay, anything else, Board Member King?
I just wanted to share that I'm joining the working group to guide the development of the statewide comprehensive historic preservation plan.
Very good,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Heavily recruited.
Yes. Yeah, it was not me. But I'm excited about it.
Very good. And I know that we do want to bring Catherine back at some point in time and give an update just on the overall historic preservation and funding and everything with it, so it goes hand in hand. Anything else? Call to the public, I just didn't have a chance to introduce, remind me your name. Ryan Gonzalez, right? Ryan is a student of mine in my management class, and all of the students have to attend a public policy meeting and then critique and evaluate the effectiveness of the meeting. And I'm just reminding him that I am the person who grades.
Talk to Pamela.
All right, future meeting dates, and notwithstanding Board Member Buchanan's comment about taking it on the road, and certainly Tonto is high in the priority list, and so I know that they'll work on that and see what we can do. And if there is nothing else, again, Jeff, thank you for all the good work on the grant, Don, with your report. Good luck, Brittany, on everything coming up. Hope there's good news for that, and with that, well, meeting is adjourned.